Remarkable letter is found from Mrs. W. A. Candler's uncle, describing Civil War. In looking over some old papers a few days ago, Mrs. Warren A. Candler, wife of Bishop Candler, came across an interesting letter written by her uncle, the late Captain W. S. Evans, to Mrs. J. C. Curtright, of Lagrange. Captain Evans was a brother of heirs Curtright and lived in Lagrange at the time he enlisted in the Confederate service. Mrs. Curtright's husband, Mrs. Candler's father, was killed in battle at Perryville, Kentucky, October 8, 1862, about a year before this letter was written. The letter was written in camp, while a lieutenant from near Hagerstown, Maryland, October 9, 1863. Captain Banks was the father of Mrs. Charles Banks, of Atlanta, and Mrs. Tom Kendall, of Covington. After Lieutenant Banks wrote this letter, he lost a leg in battle, in Maryland, after achieving his captaincy. He returned to his old home in Lagrange after the war, where he lived for years as an honored and respected citizen of that community, removing later to Atlanta, where he died a year or so ago. The war letter follows. The letter from the front. Camp near Hagerstown, MD, October 9, 1863. My dear sister, I wrote a short and hurried letter to Ma yesterday. I had not time or feeling to write more. I commenced this, not knowing but what I will be called to march in an hour, and not knowing when I will get a chance to send it off. I am now about 8 miles from Williamsport, which is on the Potomac. We came direct from Gettysburg, PA, where the battle was. All of General Lee's army is near here. The Potomac is much swollen from late rains, but I don't think it is General Lee's desire or intention to recross until he again meets the enemy. There are thousands of wagons between here and the river we will have to defend. The battlefield or Gettysburg is only about 15 miles from here. Sister, it would be almost impossible for me to give you a full account of our movements since I last wrote you. I wrote to some of you from Carlisle. After leaving that place, we marched in the direction of Harrisburg, the capital of Pennsylvania. All of us thought we were going to that place when we suddenly turned off in the direction of Baltimore. All were in fine spirits at the prospects of going to Baltimore. I thought I would take dinner with Mrs. Coulter, but suddenly turning to the right, we marched in the direction of the long-to-be-remembered Gettysburg. Soon, the wagons were all sent to the rear and the troops were hurried forward. We could distinctly hear the roar of cannon in front. We had marched very hard and the boys were all very much worn, but the roar of artillery seemed to give them strength. Soon we came in sight of the Yankee pickets and skirmishers. We made no stop, but soon threw the skirmishers in. The town of Gettysburg was now in full view about 1 mile distant. Gettysburg is a beautiful town about twice as large as Lagrange. We halted and rested about 1 hour, but so short a time was not sufficient to entirely rest our boys, for they had marched very hard. Yet we were ordered to go forward. We did so amidst the roar of artillery and the rain of shot and shell. The Yankees were in large numbers, and fought more stubbornly than I ever saw them, or ever want to see them again. Several times we were not more than 50 yards apart. Twice the Yankees fixed bayonets and thought they were going to meet us hand to hand, but our boys raised a shout and, rushing forward, pushed them back, fighting us all the time. We soon drove them in the town and, pushing forward, drove them out on the other side, where they had a very strong position. Night being close at hand, we halted to rest and slept in the town. 2 days desperate fighting. The following 2 days was the most desperate fighting I ever saw. The Yankees were on a hill and our troops charged them time and again. First, we drove them 2 miles. There was great slaughter on both sides, but from what we can learn the enemy's losses were much greater than ours. We fell back to this place and the Yankees, it is said, fell back in the direction of Washington City. I don't know where they are now, but from every indication they are close at hand, and there is great probability of another big battle. God grant we may be successful and I may be spared to return in peace and safety to my dear friends at home. Sister, pray for me that I may be a true and good man. Colonel Wynne and Joe Law were both killed in the first charge we made. Both were killed instantly. You can console Joe's mother. He was a brave young man and died at his post gallantly fighting for those he loved. I am very sorry, indeed, that Colonel Wynne was killed. He was a good friend to me and I will miss him very much. He was several yards in front of the regiment when he fell. When we got to him, he was dead. He did not speak a word after he fell. Though the bullets were falling thick and fast, I wanted to remain with him, yet duty called me forward, and forward we went. I am truly thankful that I have been spared this far. Sister, the chances in a battle are alone with God, but whether I be spared or not, I try to feel as swell and say, Thy will, O God, be done. And should it be His will that I should fall, why not me, dear sister, as well as others? What am I that He should be mindful of me? That which I desire most is that I may be prepared when called. Pray for me that I may be prepared. You have heard, I reckon, all the particulars of Charles Morgan's death. He had crossed the river when the Yankees made an attack on our wagons at Williamsport. We had but few troops there at the time, so all the soldiers present were ordered out to defend the wagons. Charles went. The Yankees, seeing them, commenced to shell them. A piece of shell struck Charles in the right side, knocking his watch through him and tearing his bowels out. He was killed instantly. Charles will be missed very much, for he was beloved by the entire regiment. He was a noble young man. And to me a brother. May I meet him in heaven. Jack, Tax, and Dan Spear were there and attended the burial. This report I get from men of the regiment who were there. I expect Guy has written home before this time and given all the particulars. William Armstrong, who was sent back sick, came up again last night. He had been staying at Jordan Springs with Button and Ben. He says that just before our troops passed through that county the surgeons had given Ben lip, and thought he would die in a few days, but Armstrong says since that time Ben has been slowly improving and thinks he will be able to go home in a few weeks. They say Ben is a perfect shadow. Poor fellow, and there is no telling what he has suffered. I do hope he may live to get home. There is a report from Lagrange that Tom Cartwright is nearly home. Is that true? Hogan and Gibson were wounded very much alike. Both were struck in the side, but the bullet did not go straight in but glanced out. Both have painful wounds. Both were necessarily left behind. Wiley Rowland had the small bone broken in one arm. 3 or 4 others were very slightly wounded. I have just received the letter brought by Charles Morgan. I was very glad to hear from home and to hear that you all were getting on well, though I fear you suffer more than you tell. May I soon be at home with you. Tell Church Alford I am obliged to him for writing to me, and hope he will do so again soon and not wait for me to write, for I know not when I will have an opportunity. I wish I had time to write more. Give my love to all. Kiss the little ones for me. Tell Scott and Tobe, our faithful servants, I will never forget them. Write often to your affectionate brother. W. S. Evans.